So I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight for our Great River Greening Wonder Hour. First, I'll tell us a little bit more about us. So in its simplest form, Great River Greening takes the bad and makes it beautiful. We transform threatened natural areas, those overrun by invasive species, erosion, and suffering in response to our changing climate, into healthy, resilient ecosystems. With some of the top ecologists in the region on our team, Great River Greening protects Minnesota's waterways, restores our public parks, sustains native wildlife, and pushes the needle towards a more sustainable model for agriculture. We make and keep Minnesota beautiful. So if you've hiked in our regional parks, brought your family to a local lake, or cycled along the river corridor, you've probably seen our work without even knowing it. We've touched more than 40 parks and lakes across the state in our 26 years. So sometimes it's easier to understand what we do by understanding what we do that's different. So Great River Greening doesn't participate in advocacy or land acquisition. We have great partners doing that important work. So instead, we do the actual restoration work. We're on the ground, planting trees, removing invasive species, reviving shorelines, and finding natural solutions to environmental problems. And to make it even better, we do all of this alongside thousands of volunteers, including kids and teens. So tonight we'll be talking about bee lawns. So I thought it would be appropriate for me to highlight some of the work Great River Greening is doing for pollinators. So with rising demand for native seed a few years ago and a desire for specific plant varieties, some of our commercial seed suppliers had a lack of inventory for Great River Greening and our restoration work. So with funding support from the Butler Family Foundation and the General Mills Foundation, Great River Greening created pollinator seed banks across the metro area from Woodbury to Chanhassen on over 100 acres. Rather than mix the species throughout the area like we would on a normal restoration planting, these plantings are organized as you would maybe in a nursery. They're in species plots to make harvesting the seed easier in the future. Once matured, these acres will be filled with grasses and flowering forbs that will provide food and nesting habitat for bees, butterflies, and many other pollinator species. They will also provide us much needed native seed. And the work is already happening. This past fall, we worked with volunteers to make our first seed harvest at a planting site in Lake Elmo. And then this summer, we're going to launch an exciting program that we're calling Pollinator Central, where over 500 acres across 20 sites will create a corridor with flight-specific spacing for pollinators, so it makes it easier for them to migrate across the state. So these plantings will be reach from eastern Dakota County all the way to far western Stearns County. And a key component to this project will be citizen scientists. So folks like you helping us to monitor the species on each site. This project is in partnership with the Xerxes Society and is funded by the Minnesota Environmental and Natural Resources Trust Fund. So stay tuned to Great River Greening to learn more about this exciting venture as we expand our pollinator habitat across the state. And now I'll share the screen so we can get into the good stuff. So I want to start by saying thank you to our speakers this evening. We are so honored to have Bobby and Laura on our Great River Greening board, and they are always willing to share their expertise and talents with us. It's so great to have people on our board that are so willing to say yes when we ask them to do things for us. So we're so happy to have them here tonight. We're also joined by Bree Bowerly, who is a project manager and habitat specialist with Minnesota Native Landscapes. M&L is not only a restoration partner for our operations staff and a source for many of the plants and seeds that we use in our work, but they are also a past event sponsor. So I really want to take a moment to thank all three of them for being here tonight and sharing their expertise with us. So as we get going, if you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to drop them into the chat function in the Zoom call, and we can ask them at the end. I'll also open it and let people unmute themselves if chatting is not into the chat box isn't your speed. And then a recording will be shared after this. So if something happens and you need to leave early and take care of something, don't worry, you won't miss anything. I'll send a copy of the presentation to everyone who registered. So with that, I will turn it over. Bobby, take it away.
Okay, just some basic facts and some thoughts. Right now, this pretty much a lie right now. In 2005, the last time they recorded this was 40 million acres of lawn. Next, please. All right, so that comes down to 1.9%, almost 2% of the surface of the continental United States. And remember, there's a lot of mountains that don't count in the area that could have a lawn like this. The single largest irrigated crop in the country, 3 times as much space as irrigated corn, 9 billion gallons of water per day, and according to the EPA, half of it is wasted. Whether it's wasted because they're putting too much, or it's wasted because it's flowing off of and not really going where it's supposed to. It's watering concrete. 7+ million tons of fertilizer. And there's something you all can get involved in. And there's 70 million pounds of pesticide, and that includes herbicides also. Next. Okay, 3 types of grasses in Minnesota. Monoculture. Basically, at the best you're going to get out of this is these 3 grasses mixed. You're going to get Kentucky bluegrass, you're going to get perennial rye, and fescue. And the mixture is going to be pertaining to what kind of soil, sun, land it's in. But those are the 3 northern grasses that we grow here, which grow well in the spring, go dormant in the summer, and grow well again in the fall. And that's something to keep in mind, okay? So the reality is the vast monoculture of perfectly mowed front yards, the biggest stretch of the American landscape, isn't going anywhere soon, but slowly and in relatively small ways, it's starting to change. And I really do think, next slide, please, that you guys can do something about it. You know, we don't need the lawns that we have. You know, lawns were made for, you know, if you trace the history, which I find fascinating, it goes all the way back to like Versailles and then George Washington and Mount Vernon and railroads and cars where people wanted to put a beautiful lawn out front so the passengers going by could see, to where now it's too much. It's an overabundance. So if this is the perfect time to rethink your landscape, whether you put more plants in or you change some of your area to play area, to mulch area, to rocks, or a bee lawn. I think that's it.
That was your part of the show. We'll pass the torch. Let Laura.
Here, okay. So my role here today is to tell you about my bee lawn because I do have one, and there's 3 reasons why I first installed my bee lawn. One, I want my home and my lawn to be completely chemical free with both herbicides and pesticides and synthetic fertilizers as well. Second, I just prefer the look of flowers over green grass. And I also, of course, want to support pollinators. So here is my story. I first put in, overseeded my lawn. So what I did was mowed the grass very short, and then just with a typical seed spreader, spread the seed all over my lawn. And as we heard at the beginning, the clover was certainly first to come up. It kind of came up in patches, especially the really lush sunny patches that get a lot of water. That's what came up first. And then I started to see a bit of some thyme, and then I started to see a bit of the prunella or the self-heal as well. But really last summer in 2020 was when I feel like my bee lawn hit its stride. It looked beautiful throughout the season. It stayed green throughout the season and tackled a few other problem areas that were kind of unforeseen as well. Click. What I do is keep my lawn very tall in height. The reason I do that is because a tall lawn, whether it's grass or a bee lawn, a tall lawn helps retain moisture. It helps shade out any unwanted weed seeds that reach the surface so they don't ultimately sprout and grow. And then also with the bee lawn, to prevent the need for any fertilizer, clover is very high in nitrogen. So as you mow it and the little clippings, we just leave everything right on the lawn. As those clippings decompose and add back to the soil, it's natural fertilizer for itself. Clover is great for that. It's also great to use as a winter crop in your veggie gardens for the exact same reason. It's high in nitrogen, and that is fertilizer for everything. So that's another added benefit for us. Okay, so here's one of the added benefits that I didn't think of. Right along the front border of my lawn, along the road, is the sunniest, driest part of my lawn. It also gets damaged from the snowplow chucking up the road salt, and Kentucky bluegrass, as Bree confirmed for me, is very susceptible to damage from road salt. So that strip was horrid. The crabgrass took over every year. However, last year, the thyme really thrived in that location. It's a Mediterranean plant, so it loves that hot, dry climate, and that's exactly what I have right along the road, where it doesn't get a whole lot of moisture. It's kind of up elevated above the rest of my lawn. So it doesn't get to all the water drainage that comes through. Now, one interesting thing that someone told me once, not affiliated with Great River Greening or MNL, was that the thyme wouldn't work in the lawn. Forget the thyme seeds, because thyme is hard to grow from seed, and it's just not going to come up. However, my thyme in the yard is thriving. So I really, if you ever hear that, don't believe that part of it. And then one other thing that I noticed almost right away in the first year with all the clover coming up is that bunnies prefer the lawn more now over just the straight grass, and have really left a lot of my flowers alone. They still eat some now and then, but because they have this lush bee lawn full of clover and full of the prunella to eat as well, they're far more happy munching on that than nibbling on things in the garden. So I didn't write that down, but that's one thing I always like to mention, because gardeners and bunnies don't always get along so well. Okay, click ahead. All right, so here are the three flowers that I have. The prunella, this was the last one to really show up in my lawn, but that's that darker purple one. All three flowers are here in this photo, although the thyme, it's right in the front on the left side of the picture. It's not in super full bloom in this one. But the prunella blooms all the way from June to October for me. It was the last one to come up. The thyme is probably my favorite because, as I mentioned, it does take care of that big problem area in my yard right along the road. And then the clover, which I love as well. It really took over, and even in the shady areas, everything is a little slower to spread into the shady areas. The grasses are definitely doing better in that environment, but the clover does creep into the shady areas as well. And I do have a puppy. Her name's Penny. She's a Shar-Pei, and clover especially is resistant to damage from dog urine, which is a big problem with folks with big, expansive green lawns. Okay, click ahead. So when we talk about pollinators and we want to help them, of course, we kind of immediately go to bees, and there are bees throughout my lawn. I love to see those every day, but it's more than just bees that we're helping. There are host plants. The clover especially is a big host plant for a few butterflies. The sulfurs, those are those little yellowish orange ones that you see kind of typically you see them sipping up the salt in the puddles and stuff. Those use the clover to lay their eggs. They typically would prefer a more native clover, but they do use the white clover as well. And then the thyme, I actually didn't know this until a bit ago. Lacewings, which are a huge beneficial insect for gardens and vegetable gardens in particular, prefer thyme to lay their eggs in. So it's more than just bees. There's a lot of other pollinators and beneficial insects that benefit from the bee lawn as well. I think that's I think that's end of part.
Yeah. Now we'll pass the torch to Bree.
Okay. So Laura went over a lot of the flowers that are in the bee lawn. I'll point out quick in the picture on the left is creeping thyme right along like a fire pit area. So like Laura said, hot, dry, where you can't get other things to grow, especially lawn. You might be able to get creeping thyme to grow, but the reason that they're all mixed together is they all kind of have their own preference. So I'm with Minnesota Native Landscapes, and we primarily grow native, flowers and grasses that are indigenous to Minnesota. And we took a stance a few years ago, and decided bee lawns are beneficial turf alternative. They serve these really important purposes that we don't have like a wide market of native species availability. You could do a full native bee lawn with blue grama grass and ground plum and coreopsis and like calico aster, but they're going to be a lot more expensive, so maybe not quite as readily available for seeding like a 1/4 acre yard. They can be a little bit more woody stemmed. These are all, a little bit softer stemmed herbaceous plants. And they're a great alternative to those monoculture grasses that Bobby talked about. But then that other component that some people include with bee lawns and some people don't is the fine fescue blend. So whether you're starting over from scratch or you're overseeding an existing lawn, another main component, by weight, it's the largest component of a bee lawn mixture, would be the fine fescues. And those are, like I mentioned, not native to Minnesota, just like, self-heal is actually native to Minnesota, but a lot of the varieties that you can find commercially available are from Montana or Oregon or something, but they still are, well adapted to our climates and a better alternative to monoculture grasses. But the fine fescues, they come from maybe either the Western states or likely Canada. And they're going to be a blend of a few different types of fescue. Usually it's sheep fescue, hard fescue, chewings fescue, and a creeping red fescue. And these are just these like really tolerant, durable. They look sort of similar to our, a lawn that you're used to seeing, but they're finely bladed. They grow, a few inches tall, and then they kind of just flop over and give like a meadow look. So you really never have to mow them. They don't send up seed heads like turf lawn does. You don't have to mow because you're not getting seed heads from turf. But they could just kind of grow up and then they just kind of flop over and have a nice meadow look. If you do decide to mow to kind of keep up appearances and keep, a 4 or 5 inch lawn, you can do that every so often, but you don't have to do it nearly as often because fescues are slower growing than like Kentucky bluegrass or ryegrass would be. So they're really beneficial in so many ways. So worthwhile to have here in our climate where we could use an alternative to that high maintenance turf. We can go to the next slide. So in the top left is just like an expansive unused yard space that we're kind of used to seeing in Minnesota. So, if you have children that use the lawn for sports or, something where you need to keep a manicured area, maybe you're going to use it for bocce ball or I don't know, something where you want, kind of a short mowed lawn. Well, then consider unutilized spaces for bee lawns, boulevards, sloped areas, hillside. Nobody wants to, be dragging that lawnmower up and down your steep slopes. It's kind of dangerous too. Cabins, do you want to get up to the cabin and mow the lawn, or do you want to get up to the cabin and, hit the lake? Outlots, there's a lot of maintenance that goes into outlots, like whether they're privately owned or owned by a municipality. We are sometimes maintaining them to that kind of regular high turf standard, so it's not necessary. If you're hesitant to trade in this clover look for the, you know, what you're used to seeing, the traditional turf lawns, consider doing a bee lawn in the backyard only. You know, maybe where you have the majority of your yard space, but not necessarily, you know, something that a lot of people are looking at other than you. And maybe that's the space you're utilizing the most. So keeping the chemical inputs down can be really beneficial. You can go to the next slide. So a lot of people ask how to get started with a bee lawn, right? So it's not something we're necessarily used to working with, but it's actually really easy. There's really two methods for getting started, and they're very different, right? So you have an existing lawn that you can interseed the entire bee lawn blend, fescues to flowers. It works great with thinner lawns. So like as you're planning a bee lawn project, stop overspraying, you know, stop having, you know, a lawn care company come and spray for broadleafs. Because a lot of times that has soil residual. So you want to keep track of that, right? So you want to make sure you don't have any pre-emergent in your lawn that's going to keep seeds from blooming for 6 months or however long. And stop fertilizing and watering, because you really kind of want to set your lawn back. So we want the lawn to be a little bit scraggly, a little bit thin, have open space between the grass blades. So bee lawn, what? Oh, okay. Bee lawns go great in kind of what is like a kind of a crummy lawn to start with. If it's super lush, super green, it's going to be a little bit harder to get other seeds established. So when getting started, it's really important to set back the current or the existing turf lawn. And you can do this by like burning your lawn, by setting your mower deck as low as it goes. Wait till it gets kind of warm out so that you can really burn your lawn. So you want to set the deck as low as it can go and then mow your lawn. Go slow because it takes a long time. It chews up a lot of grass. And then soon after, if it's hot and dry out, you'll burn your lawn, and that's actually a good thing. You want to rake or bag the thatch or rake in between, and then burn the lawn again. And then you're about ready to seed your bee lawn. The other option is starting from scratch. So this is, you know, more easily done on a freshly graded yard, but there's other methods to get to that fresh soil, and that's like smothering with that's the method where you lay down like cardboard or newspaper and then you cover it with soil or compost, and then you can either lay down another layer, or it all depends on what you're starting with. If you're starting with a pretty low quality lawn, it's not going to take much to kill your turf grass. Luckily turf grass is 3 inches or so of root depth, so not too much. So tilling is another method. Solarization is a method. I don't like recommending it. I think the soil gets a little hot. It's not great for the soil microbes and soil health in general. So solarizing isn't my favorite method to recommend. I'd rather lightly till, sod cut, smother the lawn to kind of set back what's there, and then get going with the new seeding mixture. And then when you're seeding a bee lawn, you can add compost as a spreader if you want, like an organic compost. That could be a great way to kind of enrich the soil and promote the germination, but you don't have to. You don't need any sort of fertilizer with bee lawn, and you don't really need any water. It's great to water it in, give it an inch of water after you sprinkle the seeds out. Lightly rake them in any case. Whether you're overseeding an existing lawn or starting from scratch, you want really good seed to soil contact, but you don't want to bury the seeds too deep. So a light raking is really all you need. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so then after you seeded, whether it's overseeded existing lawn or started from scratch, you're kind of going to have 2 different routes to travel next. Because if you overseed an existing lawn, you're still going to have some bluegrass or whatever type of lawn you had to begin with still intermixed in there. And over time, especially if you do seed the full bee lawn mix with fescues and the flowers, over time you're going to lose that Kentucky bluegrass. It'll get out competed by the fescues and ideally the flowers. So that's great. But in the meantime, when you're dealing with having some turf grass still in there with seed heads, you're going to have to do some sort of maintenance where you're mowing it. But like Laura said, it's great to mow as tall as you can. You can do that with, I think some push mowers go up to 4 inches. Riding lawnmower should go 4 or 5 inches, no problem. But my favorite tool to have is a weed whip, especially when you're dealing with, you know, a smaller yard. It's great to do really selective work. So you can kind of just buzz those seed heads off and avoid your flower patches. It's great for weed control. You can kind of take care of it if you have any annual weeds, especially soon after seeding. You may have some annual weeds that are, you know, sprouting up well above the turf lawn, and maybe just knock those heads back. You're just trying to prevent those particular flowers from seeding. Again, I mentioned they're, you know, pretty drought tolerant, drought resistant, so you're not going to need to do any watering. So that's great. We're not going to be wasting so much water on our lawns when you establish a bee lawn. If it gets really hot and dry and you may be get your seed down a little late in the season, we haven't had an unseasonably dry summer in, you know, a few years, and so we've been really lucky with any kind of seeding, whether it's like a native prairie seeding or a bee lawn seeding. We haven't needed a lot of supplemental water over the last few summers. It's been great. So beyond that, no need for fertilizer or water, or no need for fertilizer or pesticides, which is, again, beneficial. You're spending a lot less money on those products, and then you know, your seed cost equals out, you know, pretty quickly when you're not fertilizing and treating with pesticides. The soil health will improve just by planting these more diverse species, and over time you can kind of play with the bee lawn. You can add more perennial flowers if you'd like. If you'd like to experiment with some ground plum or some coreopsis, then seed them into little patches, especially if you have sunny spots, or if you have shady area that, you know, maybe you have the fescues growing really well, because the fescues are very shade tolerant. Then you can, you know, maybe look into some native shade tolerant species that would look nice intermixed with your fescues. Then this can be, you know, overseeded through your whole yard, and it's going to look different in different areas. Kind of like Laura said, you know, in some spots the creeping thyme is going to thrive. At first the clover is going to thrive, and the clover will thrive most likely in large patches in the sunny areas, and then you may have the self-heal in areas that you have just for some reason a different soil. Maybe there's a little bit of a drainage, or maybe it's up against the house. It's just going to change over time, and you're going to kind of get to watch that happen. It's kind of exciting and a lot more to look at than a traditional turf lawn. So I don't think I have any more slides, but you can go forward.
That's it.
Oh, I was just going to say the timeline for seeding it's pretty typical, like seed in the spring or seed in the fall. Avoid the heat of the summer. If you're not ready to plant right now in the springtime, then kind of just plan your project through the summer and prepare for it, and get that seed down in the fall time, or in the late summer and fall, sometime after September. Okay,
All right.
I'd just like to say something. Like Bree said it really the best. You don't have to do everything. You don't have to do every square inch. But if everybody does a little bit more, eventually we'll win. But remember that just by shortening up your lawn, you're really helping, no matter how you do it. That's all.
All right. So we'll open it up for questions. You can send them in. Some people have already done it. You can send it in the chat function, or I'll go through what we have, and then we can, if you want to, I'll close the screen and we'll see faces if you want to unmute and ask your question live as well. So the first question, and we got it from 2 attendees, is what do you do with creeping Charlie if you already have that in your lawn before you start your bee lawn?
I can answer this, or I'll try. But so, you know, creeping Charlie is a lawn weed flower. You can take it or leave it. If you want to try it, I have not tried this, but I have heard about it, and I do plan to try it this spring. Is a product called iron chelate, and you're supposed to be able to put it down in the springtime and set back the flowers like the creeping Charlie, but it will set back other broadleafs in your lawn. So if you already have an established bee lawn, then you'd have to use it really selectively. But it's kind of like it's not really an herbicide, but it's just a product that you can, use on your lawn to kill Creeping Charlie. But I don't know enough about it to say for sure how it works, but that is one thing that I've heard. Otherwise, you can seed your bee lawn right into Creeping Charlie and either hope that it outcompetes. Creeping Charlie has benefits to pollinators as well, but I have heard it's sort of like the equivalent of sugar water, so we can discriminate against it a little bit. The pollen and nectar are not quite as nutritious for pollinators, but as like clover would be. But you can seed your bee lawn over it, or you can hopefully set it back significantly prior to this seed installation by short mowing, light tillage, that can help set it back. But providing a good competition might be the best effort.
Go get them more.
So I have used the liquid iron on my Creeping Charlie. I've actually tried it on a ton of different weeds in my lawn just for fun, even though I welcome them. I was just doing a science experiment. But it didn't straight outright kill all the Creeping Charlie, but it definitely did set it back. So I think repeated work with that would make an immense difference on the amount of Creeping Charlie. It isn't the cheapest option. A bottle maybe about this big was about $25, which I don't know, to me that seemed kind of expensive because I'm kind of thrifty. But it goes a long way. Of course, you mix it in one of the regular pump sprayers and spray it on, and I was impressed at how it worked with the Creeping Charlie. Again, it didn't like take it all out, but it definitely damaged it and set it back.
Okay.
I mean, if you don't want to use chemicals, you certainly could smother that area. But remember, Creeping Charlie grows in the shade, so more than likely you've got shade is what's causing your Creeping Charlie. It'll mingle in with your bee lawn or whatever you do, but you could smother it, like Bee said, with cardboard or whatever, anything that you can put on top of it, and that'll kill it eventually.
Okay. So next question, speaking of shade, would a bee lawn work if you have a really shady backyard?
Maybe. It might. I think it's still worth trying. The fescues will do very well. So at any point, you're going to have at least coverage of fescues, which can establish well even under like dense maple coverage. So that would be, a benefit at the very least. And you may see some of the flowers, especially I think this South Heel can tolerate some shade. You probably won't get creeping time, but you may have a combination of the other two.
Okay. And then on the shade topic, one of the Holly wondered if adding in a shade tolerant, would common blue violet be something someone could plant that is a shade tolerant that would be good for in a bee lawn?
I love the violets in my lawn. I certainly let them grow and I seeded right along, and they are competing well with the other flowers. My violets are doing excellent with my bee lawn.
All the violets. There's native violets to Minnesota. They're a little hard to find because they're hard to grow, but they are out there, and it is an excellent addition.
All right. And then along the lines of the thinking about what kind of lawn you had, if your lawn is currently really mossy, would a bee lawn transition, or would a mossy lawn not be a good start to a bee lawn?
You kind of have to
go ahead. Go, Greg.
I was going to say you have to kind of scratch the moss up. Like no matter what, you need good seed to soil contact. And mossy is moss is like so mounded and a little bit tough to penetrate. So you'd have to take a hard tine rake. It's pretty, like you kind of have to really scratch it up. But the fescue should do okay where the moss is growing.
Exactly.
Okay. And then a couple questions. And where could someone get this seed mix if they wanted to start?
Bree, you answer that question.
Yeah. M&L does sell bee lawn on our website. It's under our shop page and under seed mixes. You can find the bee lawn towards the bottom. You can also buy the fescue separately. So especially if you have a shady yard and you're looking to establish some cover and you don't want to spend the money for the flower portion, but you want to cover the shade, I encourage you to at least try some of the fescues there. But you can get bee lawn elsewhere in some stores.
I have the M&L bee lawn, and like I said, I'm really happy with it.
And be careful, because sometimes going into a garden center and buying a product, they may not be native or hardy in Minnesota. So like anything else you do in gardening, read the label, because there's a really good chance what they're selling you isn't going to grow like the stuff that Bree or any of the quality native landscape supply houses will sell you.
Okay. And then if you already have a bee lawn and you've had some spots where it didn't take, or the plow took out some, where can you buy on Bree on the M&Ls, can you buy it in a small quantity if you're just trying to fill in for your seeding?
So we only sell by the 1,000 square foot right now, but we are going to be adding an addition where you can buy just the flower separate from the full mixture. So at the very least, you could do that, would just enhance the flowers in some areas, because I think that's where you kind of have the most trouble. I know you can buy, well, actually, no, that's not true. On our website, you can buy individual flowers, the creeping thyme and the self-heal in 2-ounce quantities in our shop page under individual flower species.
Okay.
And you should be able to find clover anywhere.
You should be able to find clover anywhere, and it should be relatively inexpensive. You shouldn't have to pay too much for Dutch white clover. Dutch white clover is what you want for the bee lawn.
Okay. And then a question, someone is looking to do more landscape work. So they're looking to do putting in native bushes in their yard. And then maybe this one's more for Bobby. What are the pros and cons to doing a bee lawn and new shrubs at the same time?
Well, there's absolutely no reason you can't do both. I mean, one has nothing to do with the other. And you would probably want to, like Bree said, get the bee lawn going earlier, because you can plant the shrubs right through the whole season. But no, you can do one in conjunction with the other. We've done it many times at landscape jobs where you put in a bee lawn or you put in native areas and you plant native shrubs. No problem whatsoever.
Okay. So if anyone else has any more questions, you can go ahead and chat them in, but I will stop sharing my screen so we can see faces if you want to signal us that you'd like to ask a question. We can do it that way as well. So there is a feature in Zoom where you can raise your hand, so you can do that, or you can wave at us, take yourself on mute and ask. We'll do our best to get them.
Remember, guys and gals, it's not hard. It takes some time. It's not an overnight deal. And, you know, I just saw a thing when I was looking this up. Somebody had a great sign and said, "It's not weeds, we're feeding the bees." I mean, it's pretty a good thing to let your neighbors know that you're doing this for a purpose. Besides, you know, you don't want to use chemicals. You want to help the environment, but people look, there are ordinances out there that say you can't do this. So make sure that you're checking and make sure that you're letting people know this isn't unkept. This is the way it's supposed to be.
And
You know, go ahead.
like Laura, well, will it spread to, like, Laura, has your bee lawn migrated to the neighbors? Is it a little more pollinator friendly next door now too?
So that's some of the biggest comments I get when I like share pictures or post about my bee lawn is like, did you ask your neighbors if this is okay? And that kind of thinking. And to be honest, I'm not concerned about what is happening in my neighbor's lawn, because on both sides of me, they're treating their lawn the way I don't want to treat my lawn. I need to worry about my space and my family, and the best for us, I believe, is that yes, the flowers will creep over. That's just natural, just like creeping Charlie spreads from the neighbor's lawn to the next. They're natural and they'll seed themselves. But their herbicides will take care of it quite easily.
And it's not like dandelions. None of the flowers in the bee lawn blow around. You know, they move by birds and animals, but they could, and then they, like, the clover forms like patches and spreads rhizominously, but it's not like a monstrous amount. It's like a normal amount slowly. And then again, not like dandelion. So like, they're not going to see it blowing over into their yard. Yeah.
And
It's a
it's
slow
also
process.
not instantaneous. It's not just gonna take over.
Right.
Okay. And then our youngest attendee, Bobby, has a question. They have clover in their yard already, but it's not maybe Dutch white clover. Is that still good for bees, or?
It's fine. It probably is, though. It's either white or red. That's probably the only shot you got, right, Bree? I mean,
Yeah, the only problem, like red gets a little bit taller, but that's, that's fine. That's
yeah,
not a
right. No,
problem.
it's just saying that would be in the mix. No problem.
All right. Does anyone
Got a
else
head
have?
start on it already.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions or
This
follow
guy
up?
Tracy keeps raising his hand.
Oh, sorry. I don't mean to ignore you. It's just
Yeah,
habit,
right.
I guess.
Okay, so I think Bree probably talked about this, maybe Laura. Tell me again about not watering, because I feel like I'm being mean to my lawn.
You're not, you're feeding the weeds. Same with
Okay.
fertilizer.
So, okay, give me a little pep talk here, Bree. Okay,
You're welcome to water if you want to, especially if you want it to grow faster. But you may get more weeds, and you may mow it more often if you choose to mow it. Especially if you keep that Kentucky bluegrass in, it's going to be harder to kind of get that to go away if you keep watering. But like I said, I mean, maybe just experiment with it a little bit, see what it looks like, because the fescues, if you have a traditional lawn and you get to July where the fescues kind of start to go dormant if you don't have a sprinkler system, you'll still see some green in there, and there, it's usually because it's the fescues. Golf courses use fescue in the rough, and I mean, those are highly irrigated, but they do stay green. So try it out.
okay. I just don't want to be mean,
It's
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah,
Tough love.
okay, tough love. Okay, I got it.
All right. Anyone else? You can raise your hand and I can try to help with questions or.
Allie's got a question.
All right. You can, maybe I have to ask you to unmute. Sorry, Allie, just a second.
Huh. I think we're unmuted. You can't hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Oh, there you go.
So once we have a bee lawn, how many inches do you want to mow it to when you do mow it?
I mow mine to the highest level on our push mower, which is about 4 inches.
4 inches is, yeah, I think that's pretty standard recommendation. Perfect.
All right. Any other questions?
Laura,
Okay.
Laura, what about like mowing? How often are you mowing less?
We do mow less. We mow probably every week and a half. And it all depends on the weather too, because we still do have a lot of the original grass mixed in. We're mowing every week and a half or so, and those still are getting some seed heads and such, but I do see it getting a little bit less. Like I said, last summer was really the year that the bee lawn really started to take over. So I'm really excited to see what's happening this year as it starts to come up. One other thing I should mention, I guess, is especially this time of year, sometimes it looks a little muddier in the areas where the clover is really prevalent. It doesn't have that as thick of a base, but it comes in quickly and takes over. That's just one thing I'm kind of noticing here in some of the areas where the clover was really prevalent.
But it regenerates rather quickly.
Yep.
It's probably because you have healthy soil, and so as it breaks down the clippings, it's actually, they're actually degrading rather than just sitting on the soil surface building up thatch.
Right. Yeah, there's much less thatch.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you go that way, you started it, Bree. I mean, Chemicals we're using on our lawn have a lot of salts in them. And that salt kills most of all the microbes in the soil. So that's why we have to keep continually doing. That's how Scott's and those companies have a great model. You get a good lawn from them because you're putting chemicals down, but if you stop putting chemicals down, you don't get a good lawn. So when you go to a bee lawn or natural products, you break that cycle. You fertilize less. Your lawn, your soil is alive. And I think that's what we're all trying to do here. We're trying to bring it back to the point where the soil doesn't need us. Yes, you could help it a little compost or, organic fertilizers, but that's 2 times a year, in the spring and in the fall. You don't have to do the 4-step program. You don't have to kill every weed. I mean, and those are the things that we've been taught. Nobody's wrong here. These are the things that they've beaten into our head. You need a new green lawn. You want a great lawn. You want a Scott's lawn out there. And I'm sorry, I trash Scott's lawn, but they're all that way. And think about it. You don't have to do it. What you have to do is get life back into the soil. And it's not a one-day project. It'll take you a year or two to do that. But then all of a sudden your grass grows better, your plants grow better, everything works because that's the way it was supposed to work. It wasn't supposed to work with us pouring nitrogen on our soil, which made the grass leaves grow. So you had to mow and you had to water because the grasses go dormant in the summer and they look brown. Oh my God, what am I going to do? You've got to water. But you can break that cycle. You can honestly help all of the native species, the flora, everything that's out there. You can help by just doing a little bit, taking care of your little shot of the earth, your little space. If you do that, and we all do a little bit, it won't take long for this to take over. And that's my honest opinion. I know, get off my high horse.
Laura and Bree, do you guys have any final thoughts you want to share with us before we finish tonight?
No, I guess I just kind of like to echo something Bree said, that you don't have to start with your whole lawn. Especially if you do live in a neighborhood that sets a high value on a weed-free green front yard, and you don't want to ruffle feathers, that's fine. Try your backyard to start. You don't have to, or your boulevard if you're on a city lot. You don't have to start with the whole thing.
Do a patch somewhere, that's all.
Speaking of patch, we had one last question. If you live in the city and you have your sidewalk boulevards, like a real small, narrow strip close to the city, the question is, would it work without clover and fescues in a boulevard? Like, are creeping thyme and self-heal resilient to road salt if they wanted to go flower only in that little patch?
That would be a little rough looking, I think. Usually we recommend more diversity than less, just for those hard to grow areas. So put in as many components as you can, or start with mulch and plugs, but it depends on how big your boulevard is. It might be a little bit more cost prohibitive to do it that way.
And Laura, did you mention on the front of yours, what was growing better where the road salt was hitting your bee lawn?
The thyme definitely is thriving more there than anywhere else, and I think that's in part due to there was a lot of available ground space there when the crabgrass died, but also it's a hot, dry area, and that's naturally what thyme likes, is that Mediterranean climate. So kind of a dual effect, I think, why it's thriving there. But Bree, you also mentioned ground plum, some coreopsis. There was another ground cover mentioned somewhere in here.
Calico aster, yarrow. There's a lot.
And from Holly, who's attending, she said pussy toes and prairie smoke grow great in a hot, dry boulevard.
Yeah,
for sure.
I love pussy toes.
Laura, didn't we meet with the people in Minneapolis and the Boulevard people, and they used all sorts of wildflowers and staying in Bree's diversity. It wasn't very low, but it wasn't super high either. It was more of a garden on the Boulevard, which produces the same thing. It's just a little taller than a lawn.
Yeah, they're with an organization called Metro Blooms.
That's it.
They're really big on urban rain gardens and boulevard gardens, and they're an excellent research if you Google them on things that they do and resources that they share.
All right. And any other last minute questions or thoughts for the group? All right.
If you're interested in going with D-lawn, you might be interested in going with a little prairie too. So you might start with a V-lawn and end with a whole native prairie patch.
Yep.
Like Laura and Bree had installed in front of KARE 11.
Yes, we did. And it's fabulous.
It is. This year should be the year.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, thanks everyone. And just to keep in mind, we have another Wonder Hour coming up on April 1st, where our ecologist and project manager, Wiley Buck, will be leading us in starting native seeds on your own. And a few lucky registrants will get the seeds that I have done special magic with Wiley and are living in the fridge here for part of the process that I will learn more about in April, but some of them will go out in the mail to folks to start their own seeds and plants. So go ahead and register on our website for that Wonder Hour as well. So thanks everyone.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Have a great night.